The bathroom tiles were ice cold against my knees as I found my mother at 4 in the morning scrubbing grout with a toothbrush. Her hands were cracked and bleeding, her once proud shoulders hunched in defeat. She wore a stained apron over a threadbare nightgown, looking like a ghost of the woman who raised me. When she saw me standing in the doorway, terror flashed across her weathered face. "Corey, please," she whispered desperately. "Go back to bed before Derek wakes up. You don't understand what will happen if he finds you here." 3 years ago, when Dad passed away from his heart attack, my brother Derek convinced our mother Janet to move to France with him. At 32, I was barely keeping my construction management business afloat in Denver, drowning in student loans, and trying to rebuild after my divorce. Derek painted this beautiful picture of Mom living in a charming French countryside villa with him and his wife Celeste, speaking about afternoon walks through lavender fields and cozy family dinners. Every month, Derek would call with glowing updates. Mom was learning French from the local baker's wife. She had joined a gardening club. Celeste was teaching her to make authentic coq au vin. The photos he sent showed Mom smiling at outdoor markets, posing beside ancient stone churches, laughing with Celeste at sidewalk cafes. Everything looked picture perfect. My guilt ate at me constantly. While Derek was being the devoted son, I was struggling to pay my mortgage and dealing with equipment breakdowns on job sites. The plane ticket to Lyon cost more than I made in 2 weeks. Every time I mentioned visiting, Derek would say Mom was traveling with seniors groups, or that Celeste's family was staying over. There was always some gentle reason why it wasn't the right time. Finally, after saving for 8 months and completing my biggest project, I bought that ticket. The excitement of surprising Mom kept me awake during the entire 9-hour flight. I pictured her face lighting up when I walked through the door, imagined us talking for hours about Dad's memory and my future plans. Derek's villa sat on 2 acres of manicured grounds outside Lyon, exactly as stunning as the photos suggested. Ivy crawled up limestone walls and rose bushes lined a gravel driveway that crunched under my rental car's tires. When Derek opened the massive wooden front door, his embrace felt theatrical, too enthusiastic, like he was performing for an invisible audience. "Okay, Corey, what an incredible surprise. Mom's resting right now, but she'll be thrilled tomorrow. You know how she values her afternoon naps these days. Celeste is at the market, but she's prepared the most amazing welcome dinner. Come, let me show you around our little paradise." The house tour felt rehearsed. Derek pointed out original ceiling beams, antique furniture that Celeste had supposedly inherited, and French doors opening onto terraced gardens. When we passed Mom's room, he knocked gently. "Maman Janet Corey has come to visit, but rest now. We'll have a proper reunion at dinner." Mom's muffled voice came through the door, strangely formal. "How wonderful. I look forward to seeing him later." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten, but Derek quickly distracted me with wine tastings and stories about local festivals. The guest room he'd prepared overlooked the vineyards, complete with fresh flowers and chocolates on the nightstand. Everything screamed thoughtful hospitality. Celeste arrived as the sun was setting, her arms full of baguettes and cheese wrapped in brown paper. She was elegant in that effortless French way, her dark hair pulled into a low chignon, wearing a simple dress that probably cost more than my truck payment. Her English carried a charming accent as she kissed both my cheeks. "Derek speaks of you constantly, Corey. Your mother adores you beyond measure. She shows us your photos every day and talks about your construction projects. Tonight, we celebrate family." At dinner, Mom appeared wearing makeup that looked carefully applied, her silver hair freshly styled. But something was wrong with her posture, the way she sat rigidly in her chair and spoke in careful, measured sentences. She asked about my work and my health, but avoided eye contact. When I mentioned specific memories from my childhood, she would glance nervously at Derek before responding. "Mom, remember when you taught me to change the oil in Dad's truck? You got grease all over your church dress and said it was worth it to see me learn something useful." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yes, those were different times. I'm grateful for this peaceful life now. Derek and Celeste take such good care of me. The words sounded scripted, like she was reciting lines from a play she hadn't chosen to be in. After dinner, Derek insisted Mom needed her rest. She tires easily these days. Age catches up to all of us. As she stood to leave, I noticed how she moved carefully, like someone in chronic pain. Her hands shook slightly as she gathered her plate. "Good night, sweetheart," she said to me, but again that strange formality, as if we were acquaintances rather than mother and son who used to talk for hours about everything and nothing. That night, I lay in the luxurious guest bed feeling deeply unsettled. The room was beautiful, but I felt like I was staying in a hotel rather than my mother's home. Through the window, I could see lights in what looked like a converted barn. Derek had mentioned his hobby workshop, but the building looked too large and organized for casual woodworking. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft shuffling sounds like someone trying not to be heard. Then the distant sound of water running, cabinet doors opening and closing. I told myself Mom probably couldn't sleep and was making tea. But something felt wrong about the stealth of those movements. When I found her in the bathroom at 4 a.m., everything crashed into focus. This wasn't the comfortable retirement Derek had described. This was something else entirely, something that made my mother afraid to look her own son in the eyes. Sleep became impossible after finding Mom on that bathroom floor. I paced the guest room until dawn, my mind racing with questions I was afraid to voice. When breakfast came, Mom appeared in a fresh dress with that same carefully applied makeup, serving coffee and pastries with the mechanical precision of a well-trained servant. Derek dominated the conversation, outlining my itinerary for the day. "You must see the Roman amphitheater in Lyon, and Celeste has arranged a wine tasting at her cousin's vineyard. Mom prefers quiet days at home, don't you, Mom and Janet?" She nodded quickly, her fingers twisting her napkin. "I have laundry to finish and some light cleaning. Nothing strenuous, just keeping busy." The word cleaning hit me like a punch. I watched Derek's face for any reaction, but he just smiled benevolently. "She insists on helping around the house. We tell her to relax, but you know how she is about staying useful." After Derek left for what he called his business meetings, I waited exactly 30 minutes before searching for Mom. I found her in the basement laundry room, not washing clothes, but sorting them into precise piles according to a detailed chart posted on the wall. Her movements were quick and efficient, like someone who had done this exact routine hundreds of times. "Mom, what is all this?" She startled so violently she dropped an armful of towels. "Corey, you shouldn't be down here. Derek doesn't like people in the basement during working hours." "Working hours? What work? These are just household chores." She looked around nervously, then pulled me behind the water heater, where we couldn't be seen from the stairs. From inside a pillowcase, she extracted a small notebook with a flower pattern cover. The pages were filled with her handwriting in blue ink. "I've been keeping track," she whispered. "In case something happens to me, someone should know the truth." The first entry was dated 8 months after she'd arrived in France. "Derek says I eat too much for an old woman. Celeste agrees that seniors need smaller portions. I can have the leftovers from their dinner guests, but only after everything is cleaned up. The scraps from 3 couples' plates are enough for someone my age." My hands shook as I turned pages filled with similar entries. Derek explained that elderly people need structure and purpose. He's arranged for me to maintain his rental properties, 5 different houses where travelers stay. I clean them between guests. Celeste says it keeps me from becoming depressed and useless. Another entry. "The arthritis in my hands is getting worse from the cleaning chemicals, but Derek says French doctors are too expensive for minor complaints. American seniors abuse medical care. Here people are tougher and don't complain about every little ache." Page after page documented a systematic destruction of her dignity. "Celeste locks me in my room when they have business visitors. She says elderly people make guests uncomfortable with their problems and neediness. I have a bucket if I need the bathroom during those times. The handwriting grew shakier in later entries. Derek is using my Social Security payments for his business expenses. He says this is fair rent for my room and meals. The American Embassy won't return my calls. Derek explained to them that I'm becoming confused and might make false complaints to get attention. Near the end of the notebook, an entry that made my vision blur. I think about Dad every night. He would never forgive me for becoming such a burden. Maybe Derek is right that I should be grateful anyone tolerates an old woman. Sometimes I think about taking all of Celeste's sleeping pills at once, but then I remember Corey might visit someday. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call me? She started crying silently, tears streaming down her cheeks without any sound. Derek reads all my mail before I see it. He's shown me letters you supposedly sent saying you're too busy with your new life to worry about family obligations. He has my passport locked in his office safe. He says if I cause trouble, he'll tell French police I'm here illegally, and they'll deport me to a nursing home where no one will visit. I pulled her into my arms, feeling how thin she'd become under her carefully chosen clothes. None of that is true, Mom. I never sent letters like that. I've been trying to visit for 3 years. She pulled back, searching my face. Derek said you blame me for Dad's death because I didn't recognize the heart attack symptoms quickly enough. The cruelty of that lie took my breath away. Dad had died instantly at his workbench in the garage, probably before he even hit the ground. The coroner had explained that nothing could have saved him. Derek had turned Mom's natural grief into a weapon against her. That's completely false, Mom. Dad's death wasn't anyone's fault, and I never blamed you for anything. Derek has been lying to both of us. She showed me photos she'd taken secretly with a disposable camera hidden in her sewing kit. Pictures of bruises on her arms from Celeste grabbing her when she moved too slowly. Images of the tiny portions of food she was allowed, always eaten after Derek and Celeste finished their meals. A photo of the lock Derek had installed on the outside of her bedroom door. The final photo showed a document in Derek's handwriting titled, Maman Janet Daily Schedule. 4:30 a.m. wake up for bathroom cleaning, 5 a.m. kitchen preparation, 6 a.m. breakfast service, 7 a.m. laundry sorting. The schedule continued in 15-minute intervals until 10 p.m. lights out with no breaks, except for the small meals of leftovers. How long has this been going on? Since about 6 months after I arrived. At first, they really did take me to markets and restaurants, like in the photos Derek sent you. But gradually, they explained that I needed to earn my keep, that American seniors are spoiled and lazy, compared to European families who understand proper respect for hard work. I thought about all those cheerful phone calls from Derek, all those happy photos, all those gentle deflections when I tried to visit. Every single piece had been calculated theater, designed to keep me away, while he systematically destroyed our mother's sense of self-worth. We're leaving, Mom. Today, right now. She gripped my arm with surprising strength. You don't understand. Derek has been planning for this. He knew you might come eventually. He's prepared for any trouble I might try to cause. Instead of packing immediately, I convinced Mom we needed to gather evidence first. If we just run, Derek will spin some story about your mental state and have us both in trouble. We need proof of what's really happening here. That afternoon, I told Derek I wanted to explore Lyon's business district and maybe look at some French construction techniques for ideas back home. He seemed pleased by this, even offering to loan me his van, since it was more reliable than my rental car for city driving. I had no intention of sightseeing. Instead, I followed the route Mom had described to the first rental property, a converted farmhouse about 20 minutes from Derek's villa. The key was hidden exactly where she'd said it would be, under a loose stone in the garden wall. Inside, I found evidence that made my stomach turn. The house was beautifully appointed for guests, with expensive linens, French antiques, and a gourmet kitchen. But in the utility room, I discovered a second notebook hidden behind the water heater. This one was in Derek's handwriting, tracking Mom's cleaning times, guest satisfaction scores, and profit margins. Property 1, Mom and Janet, average cleaning time, 2.5 hours. Guest rating 4.8 stars for cleanliness. Labor cost 0 profit margin, 92%. He was treating our mother like a piece of equipment, tracking her efficiency and output. Other entries detailed her health problems and how they affected her work speed. Arthritis, slowing bathroom cleaning. May need to adjust schedule or investigate joint supplements to maintain productivity. The most sickening discovery was a business plan Derek had written titled European Senior Services. He was planning to expand his operation, bringing other elderly Americans to France, with promises of comfortable retirement, then trapping them in similar arrangements. He'd already identified 3 potential clients through online senior communities. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Derek came home early. He's looking for you and seems angry. Where are you? I photographed everything quickly, then drove to the second property on Mom's list. This one was in Lyon proper, a luxury apartment overlooking the Rhone River. Again, the key was where Mom had said taped under a windowsill. This apartment revealed even more disturbing evidence. Derek wasn't just running illegal rentals using forced labor. He was committing identity theft and benefit fraud on a massive scale. In a filing cabinet that should have contained guest information, I found documents showing Derek had gained power of attorney over Mom's finances through forged paperwork. He was collecting her full Social Security check every month while claiming she was receiving family care from French social services. The French government was actually paying him a caregiver stipend for taking care of his elderly mother, money that was supposed to ensure her well-being and medical care. But it got worse. Derek had applied for additional benefits, claiming Mom had dementia and required round-the-clock supervision. The medical reports supporting these claims were signed by a Dr. Rousseau, but when I looked up the address, it was a vacant storefront that had been closed for 2 years. I found correspondence between Derek and someone named Henri Moreau discussing acquisition opportunities. They were actively recruiting elderly Americans through Facebook groups for expatriate retirees, offering attractive relocation packages and family assistance with French bureaucracy. A folder labeled Prospects contained printed emails from lonely seniors who had lost spouses and were considering international moves. Derek had been cultivating these relationships for months, positioning himself as a helpful American who understood the challenges of relocating abroad. My phone rang. Derek's voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the underlying tension. Corey, where are you? Mom is worried, and Celeste has prepared a special dinner. Family time is important. Don't you think? Just exploring the city like we discussed. I'll be back soon. Perhaps you should return now. Mom seems confused about your whereabouts, and we don't want her getting agitated. Elderly people can become disoriented when routines are disrupted. The threat was barely concealed. He was telling me that Mom would pay for my absence. I drove quickly to the third property, a cottage near the University District. Here I found the most devastating evidence yet. Derek was holding Mom's American passport, her Social Security card, and her birth certificate in a lockbox. But he'd also obtained a French identification card for her that listed him as her legal guardian and listed her mental status as diminished capacity requiring supervision. This fake documentation would make it nearly impossible for Mom to seek help from French authorities or the American embassy. Anyone she approached would see her as a confused elderly woman whose loving son was responsibly managing her care. In Derek's correspondence with French bureaucrats, he consistently portrayed Mom as grateful, but mentally declining, requiring structure and purpose to maintain her dignity. He'd crafted an image of himself as a devoted son, making sacrifices to care for his difficult mother. The financial records showed the full scope of Derek's operation. Between Mom's Social Security payments, French caregiver benefits, and profits from his 5 rental properties cleaned with forced labor, he was generating over €8,000 per month in income, all of it built on our mother's unpaid work and forged documents. But the discovery that made my blood run cold was a medical consultation Derek had scheduled for next week. Dr. Philippe Dubois, listed as a geriatric psychiatrist, was going to evaluate Mom's advancing dementia and make recommendations for appropriate institutional care. Derek wasn't planning to keep Mom as his personal servant forever. He was building a case to have her declared mentally incompetent and permanently institutionalized, where she would disappear completely into the French medical system. Once that happened, he would have complete control of her finances, and no one would ever question what happened to the confused American woman who used to live with her devoted son. My hands were shaking as I photographed everything. This wasn't just elder abuse or financial exploitation. Derek was systematically erasing our mother's identity and autonomy, turning her into a ghost who would vanish without a trace. The drive back to the villa felt endless. I had to warn Mom immediately, but I also had to be smart about it. Derek had been planning this for 3 years, manipulating systems in 2 countries. One wrong move, and we could both end up trapped in his web of lies and forged documents. When I pulled into the driveway, Derek was waiting on the front steps, his smile as cold and perfect as ever. "There you are, brother." We were starting to worry. "Mom has been asking about you constantly. She seemed quite distressed by your long absence. Perhaps family visits can be overwhelming for someone her age." Dinner that evening felt like a staged performance where everyone knew their roles except me. Celeste had prepared coq au vin, the same dish Derek always mentioned in his glowing phone calls about Mom's new life. The dining room candles cast warm light on faces that looked relaxed and content, but I could see the tension in Mom's shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as she served wine. I'd spent the afternoon planning this confrontation, rehearsing exactly how to present the evidence I'd gathered. But Derek struck first, launching into a concerned monologue about Mom's health. "Corey, I'm so glad you're here because I've been worried about Maman Janet lately. She's been having some episodes of confusion, forgetting conversations we've had, sometimes not recognizing where she is. The stress of your visit seems to be triggering some concerning behaviors." Mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. I could see her trying to figure out what Derek wanted her to say. "I feel fine," she said carefully. "Just tired sometimes." Derek's laugh was gentle and patronizing. "Of course you feel fine, Maman. That's part of the condition. Dr. Rousseau explained that patients often don't recognize their own symptoms. It's actually a blessing that you don't feel distressed by the memory lapses." He was establishing his narrative in real time, creating a foundation for whatever came next. I decided to abandon my careful approach and go directly to the truth. "Cut the act, Derek. I know what you've been doing to her." Celeste's wine glass paused at her lips. Derek tilted his head with what looked like genuine confusion. "I'm sorry, what act? I'm trying to have a serious conversation about Mom's health." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken at the rental properties. "These documents, Derek, the forged power of attorney, the fake medical reports, the business plan for trapping other elderly Americans." Derek studied the photos calmly, then set down his fork. "Corey, I think you may be having some kind of breakdown. Those appear to be random papers you photographed somewhere. Are you feeling all right? The stress of Dad's death, your divorce, your financial problems? Maybe this trip is bringing up unresolved trauma." His tone was so reasonable, so concerned, that for a moment I doubted my own evidence. Then I saw Mom's face and remembered the notebook full of her careful documentation. "Explain this then." I showed him the photo of her daily schedule in his handwriting. Derek glanced at it and nodded thoughtfully. "Ah, yes. Dr. Rousseau suggested we establish structure for Mom's days. Dementia patients respond well to routine, and it helps prevent the anxiety that comes with confusion. This schedule keeps her feeling useful and oriented. Celeste spoke for the first time since the confrontation began. Your mother asked us to help her remember her tasks. We were being supportive. Supportive. You're making her scrub bathroom tiles at 4 in the morning. Corey, Derek said gently, Mom has insomnia, which is common with her condition. Light activity helps her feel productive instead of lying awake worrying. We're giving her purpose during those difficult hours. Every piece of evidence I presented Derek had a reasonable explanation for. The locked bedroom door was for Mom's safety during episodes of nighttime confusion. The restricted food portions were doctor-recommended dietary management. The isolation during business meetings protected Mom from stress and overstimulation. He was so smooth, so prepared that I could see how he'd convince French authorities that he was a devoted caregiver dealing with difficult circumstances. What about her passport, her social security payments? All properly managed through legal guardianship proceedings. When someone develops cognitive impairment, family members have to make responsible decisions about financial security. I'm protecting Mom's assets from confusion or exploitation. Mom had been silent throughout this exchange, but now she looked up with steel in her voice. I don't have cognitive impairment, Derek. I know exactly what you've been doing to me. Derek's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Then he smiled sadly and reached over to pat Mom's hand. Of course you don't think so, Mama. Dr. Rousseau explained this would happen. The progression makes patients believe everyone around them is conspiring against them. It's called paranoid delusion, and it's very common. He turned back to me with that same patient, concerned expression. This is exactly why I didn't want you to visit without warning Corey. Disrupting Mom's routine triggers these paranoid episodes where she creates elaborate stories about being mistreated. It's heartbreaking, but we have to remember that this isn't really her talking anymore. The cruelty was breathtaking. Derek had constructed a perfect trap where anything Mom said to defend herself would be dismissed as symptoms of mental illness. Any evidence of abuse could be explained as necessary medical management. But I had one piece of evidence he didn't know about. Then explain this. I pulled out Mom's notebook and opened it to the entries describing her forced labor and deliberate starvation. Derek examined the pages with what looked like genuine sadness. Oh, Maman, Dr. Rousseau warned us this might happen. Dementia patients sometimes develop obsessive writing behaviors, creating detailed fantasy narratives that feel completely real to them. The handwriting analysis will show how her motor skills are deteriorating. He looked at me with brotherly concern. This notebook actually proves what I've been telling you. Look how elaborate these delusions are. How much time she spent crafting this alternate reality where she's some kind of victim. It's a classic progression pattern. I felt the ground shifting under my feet. Derek had anticipated everything, prepared explanations for every piece of evidence. Worse, his explanations were medically plausible. A French court would see exactly what he wanted them to see. A confused elderly woman and her unstable son creating paranoid fantasies about a devoted caregiver. That's when Derek played his final card. I'm sorry, Corey, but I have to tell you something. After your phone calls over the years became increasingly erratic, I contacted a psychiatrist in Denver about my concerns. Dr. Sarah Mitchell confirmed that you've been struggling with depression, financial stress, and alcohol dependency since your divorce. My blood went cold. Dr. Mitchell was real. I'd seen her a few times after Dad died when I was having trouble sleeping, but I'd never discussed Derek or Mom during those sessions. Derek continued with devastating precision. Dr. Mitchell was concerned enough about your mental state to recommend that Mom maintain distance until you received proper treatment. She felt your anger toward the family situation could become dangerous if left unaddressed. He pulled out his phone and showed me what appeared to be email correspondence between him and Dr. Mitchell, discussing my escalating delusions about family abandonment and potential for violent outbursts during emotional stress. The emails were perfectly crafted forgeries, but they looked completely authentic. Derek had been planning this protection for years, creating a paper trail that would discredit anything I said or did. I love you, brother, which is why I didn't want to embarrass you with this information. But Mom's safety has to come first. Your surprise visit, your aggressive questioning tonight, your paranoid theories about business documents, everything confirms what Dr. Mitchell predicted. He stood up slowly, as if reluctant to do what came next. I'm going to have to ask you to leave Corey, for Mom's well-being and your own. This environment isn't healthy for either of you right now. I'm not leaving without her. Derek sighed and pulled out his phone. I hoped it wouldn't come to this, but you're forcing my hand. He dialed a number and began speaking in rapid French. I caught enough words to understand he was calling police reporting a family member who was having a mental health crisis and making threats against an elderly woman with dementia. Mom started to stand up, but Celeste firmly guided her back into her chair. It's better if you stay seated, Maman Janet. Let Derek handle this situation. Within 15 minutes, 2 French police officers were standing in the dining room. Derek spoke to them in fluent French, showing them the forged emails from Dr. Mitchell Mom's notebook with her delusional writings and documentation of his legal guardianship over Mom's care. The officers looked at me with professional sympathy as Derek translated their questions. Was I taking any medications for depression? Had I been drinking today? Did I understand that my mother was receiving proper medical care for her condition? Everything I said in response sounded exactly like what a delusional person would say. My claims about forced labor sounded paranoid. My insistence that Mom was being held against her will sounded like projection of my own guilt about not visiting earlier. When they asked Mom directly if she felt safe with Derek and wanted me to leave, she looked between us with terror in her eyes. Derek had trained her well. She knew that protecting me meant confirming his stories about her mental state, which would trap her even more completely. I'm safe, she said quietly. Perhaps Corey should get some rest. The police officers agreed that I should return to my hotel in Lyon for the night and contact the American Embassy in the morning if I continued to have concerns about my mother's welfare. They would file a report noting the family dispute and my emotional instability, creating another layer of documentation supporting Derek's narrative. As I was escorted to my rental car, Derek walked beside me with his hand on my shoulder, playing the role of concerned brother perfectly. Get some help, Corey, for your own sake. When you're ready to have a rational conversation about Mom's real needs, I'll be here. But I can't let you upset her with these fantasies. He handed me a business card for a psychiatrist in Lyon. Dr. Dubois speaks excellent English and specializes in family trauma. He might be able to help you process Dad's death in a healthier way. Dr. Dubois, the same name from the appointment Derek had scheduled to have Mom declared incompetent. Derek was directing me toward his own accomplice, someone who would confirm his assessment of my mental state and Mom's condition. I drove to a hotel in Lyon feeling completely defeated. Derek had outmaneuvered me at every turn, using systems in 2 countries to build an unbreakable wall around his lies. Worse, I realized that any further attempts to help Mom would only strengthen his case against both of us. But as I sat in that anonymous hotel room, I remembered something Derek hadn't accounted for. In all his planning and manipulation, he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated our mother's intelligence and her capacity for strategic thinking under pressure. The notebook I'd shown him wasn't the only one Mom had been keeping. The hotel lobby at 6 a.m. was empty except for a cleaning woman restocking coffee supplies and a desk clerk who looked like he hadn't slept. I sat in the corner booth, clutching my 3rd cup of bitter coffee, trying to figure out my next move. Every option I could think of led to the same dead end. Derek's carefully constructed narrative would discredit anything I said or did. That's when a woman approached my table speaking softly in accented English. "Excuse me, are you Corey Williams?" She was perhaps 50 years old with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, and the kind of face that inspired immediate trust. Her business card identified her as Marie Durand, Social Services Investigation Unit, Lyon Prefecture. I apologize for approaching you this way, but I understand you had some concerns about your mother's living situation yesterday evening. My first instinct was suspicion. Was this another part of Derek's trap? But something in her manner suggested genuine concern rather than official interrogation. How do you know about that? Police reports involving elderly welfare allegations cross my desk automatically. Your brother Derek is well known to our department, though not for the reasons he believes. She sat down across from me and pulled out a thick folder. We've been investigating Derek Williams for 18 months, but elder abuse cases involving foreign nationals are extremely complex. Until now, we haven't had anyone willing to testify against him. The folder contained photographs of 3 other properties Derek was operating places Mom had never mentioned cleaning. Marie showed me surveillance photos of elderly people entering these buildings, then pictures of the same people looking exhausted and defeated weeks later. Your brother has been very careful to stay within legal gray areas. The people he targets are isolated, financially vulnerable, and easily convinced that they have no alternatives. By the time we receive complaints, the victims have been so thoroughly manipulated that they defend their abusers. One photo showed an elderly man scrubbing steps outside a Lyon apartment building at dawn. Another captured a woman who looked to be in her 70s carrying heavy bags of laundry between Derek's properties. How many people is he holding? We've identified 7 definite victims across his various properties, but we suspect there are more. Your mother appears to be his longest-term captive and the most psychologically controlled. Marie explained that Derek's operation was sophisticated and well-organized. He recruited through online expatriate communities targeting recently widowed Americans who were considering relocating to France. His initial offerings were completely legitimate. He would help with paperwork, provide temporary housing, introduce newcomers to local services. The trap closed gradually. Derek would identify financial vulnerabilities and offer to help manage complex international banking requirements. He'd convince victims that French bureaucracy was too complicated for them to navigate alone, then slowly take control of their documentation and benefits. Once he has someone's passport and Social Security access, they become completely dependent on him for survival. He's created a system where escape is virtually impossible. She showed me documents proving Derek was collecting French caregiver benefits for multiple elderly people, while providing no actual care. He was also manipulating American Social Security payments through forged power of attorney agreements, exactly as I discovered with Mom's situation. Why haven't you arrested him? We need testimony from victims who are willing to stand trial. Derek has convinced everyone that any problems they experience are their own fault, that they should be grateful for his help. Most importantly, he's established legal guardianship over several people claiming they have dementia or other cognitive impairments. Marie's frustration was evident. French law strongly protects family caregivers, especially those dealing with elderly relatives who have mental health challenges. Derek presents himself as a devoted son and brother, sacrificing his own life to care for difficult family members. But she'd been building her case, carefully documenting financial irregularities and gathering evidence of forged documents. The problem was proving Derek's victims were being harmed rather than helped. Your mother is different from the others. She's been keeping detailed records, and she's been trying to contact outside help for months. If we could convince her to testify truthfully about her treatment, we might be able to expose the entire operation. I thought about Mom's terrified face when Derek questioned her loyalty at dinner. He's got her too scared. She knows that speaking against him means he'll have her committed to an institution. That's where you become important, Corey. Your mother needs to know that she has alternatives, that someone is fighting for her freedom, but we have to be very careful about how we approach this. Marie had a plan, but it was dangerous and would require precise timing. Derek had scheduled Mom's psychiatric evaluation with Dr. Dubois for the following week. If that evaluation concluded she was mentally incompetent, Derek would have permanent control over her life. Dr. Dubois is legitimate, but he's been misled by Derek's documentation. He believes he's evaluating a woman with advancing dementia whose family is struggling with difficult caregiving decisions. If your mother appears confused or dependent during that evaluation, it will confirm everything Derek has told him. But Marie had discovered something Derek didn't know. Dr. Dubois was required by French law to allow independent evaluation requests from immediate family members. If I formally requested a second opinion evaluation, it would trigger a legal review of Derek's guardianship claims. The key is that your mother would need to demonstrate her mental competency during an independent evaluation. She would need to present her evidence coherently and explain exactly what Derek has been doing to her. How do we get her away from Derek long enough for that to happen? Marie smiled for the first time since sitting down. Derek's overconfidence is going to be his downfall. He's scheduled a large rental event this weekend, some kind of corporate retreat using 3 of his properties simultaneously. He'll need your mother working at all locations, which means she'll have to travel between buildings without direct supervision. The plan was risky but simple. Marie would arrange for Mom to be approached by social services during one of her property cleaning assignments. If Mom was willing to trust us, she could be taken to a safe location for independent evaluation and testimony. What happens to the other victims? Once we have testimony that exposes Derek's methods, we can move against him for all the related crimes. But your mother is the key. She's been there longest and has the most detailed evidence. Marie handed me her card and a packet of legal documents. Think about this carefully, Corey. If we move and fail, Derek will have everything he needs to destroy both you and your mother completely. He'll claim this proves his concerns about your mental state and her paranoid delusions. That afternoon, I drove past Derek's villa several times, trying to work up the courage to attempt contact with Mom. Each time I saw Derek's van in the driveway, I lost my nerve. Finally, around 4 p.m., I noticed the van was gone. I parked down the road and approached the house on foot, staying hidden in the tree line until I could see into the windows. Mom was alone in the kitchen preparing what looked like an elaborate meal. When I tapped gently on the back door, she nearly dropped the pot she was carrying. "Corey, what are you doing here? Derek will be back soon." Mom listened to me carefully. "There are people trying to help us, but I need to know if you're willing to take a risk." I quickly explained about Marie and the investigation about the plan to get Mom away from Derek long enough to tell her story to someone who would believe her. Mom was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. "Derek told me this morning that you had a breakdown last night, that you're being hospitalized for your own safety. He showed me papers saying you've been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia." The papers were obviously fake, but they looked official enough to convince someone who wanted to believe Derek was telling the truth. "None of that is real, Mom. But I need you to decide if you trust me enough to try escaping from this." She walked to the kitchen window and stood looking out at the gardens Derek used in his promotional photos. "I've been trapped here so long that sometimes I forget there's a world outside this house. But there's something Derek doesn't know." She led me to the basement and moved a loose board behind the water heater. From the hidden space, she pulled out a small digital recorder. "I've been taping our conversations for 6 months. Every threat, every cruel comment, every time he talks about his plans for me. I also have recordings of him discussing his other victims and his business operations." The recorder contained over 20 hours of evidence, including Derek's voice, clearly describing his manipulation techniques and his plans to expand the operation. Most importantly, it contained his admissions that Mom was mentally competent but deliberately isolated to prevent her from seeking help. "Why didn't you tell me about this last night?" "Because I knew Derek was prepared for you to find my notebook, but he doesn't know about the recordings. I was waiting for the right moment to use them." Mom had been far more strategic than either Derek or I had realized. She'd been gathering the evidence needed to destroy him, but she'd needed someone on the outside to help her deploy it effectively. "Are you ready to do this, Mom?" She straightened her shoulders, and for a moment, I saw the strong woman who had raised me, who had survived Dad's death, and tried to rebuild her life in a foreign country. "I've been ready for months, sweetheart. I was just waiting for my son to come help me fight back." Marie's plan went into motion that Friday evening. Derek's corporate retreat was a 3-day event for a German engineering firm requiring intensive cleaning and meal preparation across his entire network of properties. As predicted, Derek would need Mom working at multiple locations throughout the weekend. I spent Friday night in my hotel room going over the legal documents Marie had provided. French elder abuse law was complex, but the recordings Mom had made would constitute powerful evidence if we could get them properly authenticated and admitted to court. Saturday morning at 8 a.m., Derek's van pulled up to the first rental property in downtown Lyon. Through binoculars, I watched Mom get out carrying her usual supplies. Cleaning bucket, fresh linens, vacuum cleaner. She looked frail and exhausted, moving with the mechanical precision of someone who had performed these tasks hundreds of times. Derek handed her a detailed schedule and drove away to manage the other properties. According to the plan, Marie would approach Mom around 10 a.m. when she would be alone, and most likely to trust an official intervention. But at 9:30, everything went wrong. Derek's van returned unexpectedly. Through the binoculars, I could see him arguing with Mom in the apartment doorway. She was shaking her head, clearly upset, while Derek gestured angrily. Then he grabbed her arm and pushed her roughly back into the building. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Plan compromised. Derek suspicious. Meet at backup location immediately." The backup location was a cafe near the prefecture building where Marie could operate with institutional protection if Derek tried to interfere. When I arrived, Marie was pacing frantically while speaking rapid French into her phone. Someone warned Derek that his operation was under investigation. He's moved all his victims to a single location where he can control them completely. Derek wasn't stupid. 18 months of investigation meant Marie's department had been asking questions, and Derek had contacts throughout the expatriate American community in Lyon. Someone had tipped him off that authorities were closing in. Where did he take them? A property we didn't know about, somewhere outside our normal jurisdiction. Our legal authority is limited if he's moved them across departmental boundaries. But Marie had one last option, dangerous but potentially decisive. Derek had made a crucial mistake in his panic. By moving all his victims to one location, he'd created a scenario that looked exactly like human trafficking, rather than individual elder care arrangements. If we can prove he's holding multiple people against their will in one location, it becomes a federal crime that bypasses local jurisdiction issues. But we need evidence from inside that location. What kind of evidence? Marie pulled out a small device about the size of a smartphone. This is a GPS tracker with audio recording capability. If we could get this inside Derek's new location, it would provide real-time proof of what's happening to these people. How do we get it inside? Derek will be expecting you to try to contact your mother. If you approach him directly and demand to see her, he'll probably allow a supervised visit just to prove he's not hiding anything. During that visit, you could plant the device. The plan was incredibly risky. If Derek found the device, it would confirm all his claims about my paranoid behavior and give him justification for having me arrested or committed. But it was the only way to get evidence that could save Mom and the other victims. There's one more thing, Corey. This has to happen today. Derek has scheduled an emergency psychiatric evaluation for your mother this afternoon. If that evaluation concludes she's incompetent, he'll have legal authority to institutionalize her immediately. I drove to Derek's villa, feeling like I was heading into a battle I couldn't win. But when I pulled into the driveway, Derek was waiting for me with his usual calm smile. "Corey, I'm so glad you came back. I was worried about you after last night. Have you been able to get some perspective on the situation? I want to see Mom, Derek. I want to apologize to her for upsetting everyone." Derek studied my face carefully. Of course. She's been very concerned about you. But I think it's important that our conversation is supervised given everyone's emotional state. He led me to a sitting room I hadn't seen during my original tour. Mom was there waiting, but she looked different, more alert, less defeated. When she saw me, her eyes flicked quickly toward a bookshelf, then back to my face. "Hello, sweetheart. Derek explained that you've been having some difficulties. I hope you're getting the help you need." The words were clearly scripted, but her tone carried a subtle message I couldn't quite interpret. Derek positioned himself between us close enough to intervene if needed. "Mom, I want you to know that I love you, and I'm sorry if I said anything last night that upset you. I know Derek has been taking good care of you." As I spoke, I moved closer to the bookshelf Mom had indicated. Hidden behind a row of books, I could see the edge of her digital recorder. She'd managed to position it where it could capture our entire conversation. "That's very mature, Corey. Family healing takes time and patience." Derek's voice carried undertones of satisfaction. He thought he'd won. While Derek was focused on monitoring our conversation, I managed to place Marie's tracking device behind the same row of books. If Mom could retrieve it later and hide it properly, it would provide the evidence needed to expose Derek's operation. "Derek, I think I understand now why you've been so protective of Mom. Taking care of an elderly person with health problems must be incredibly difficult. It is a sacrifice, but family comes first. Mom appreciates the structure and security we provide even when she doesn't fully understand her own needs." "Where are you living now, Mom?" "This doesn't look like your usual room," Derek answered before Mom could speak. "We've moved to a larger property where I can provide better care for Mom and some other elderly friends who needed assistance. It's more efficient to centralize our caregiving resources." So Derek had moved all his victims to one location exactly as Marie had suspected. The recording device would capture whatever was happening at this consolidated operation. "I'd love to see your new setup, Derek. Maybe I could learn from your approach to elder care?" Derek's smile became strained. "I don't think that's appropriate right now, Corey. These are vulnerable people who need calm, stable environments. Your recent behavior suggests you might not be ready for that level of responsibility." Before I could respond, Mom spoke up with surprising firmness. "Derek, perhaps Corey could help with some of the maintenance work around here. He's very good with his hands, and I know you've been struggling to keep up with everything." Derek looked confused. This wasn't part of his script, and Mom had never volunteered suggestions before. "That's not necessary, Maman. We have everything under control." But you were just saying this morning how much work it is to maintain all these properties properly. Corey could help with repairs or painting. It might be good for him to feel useful." I realized what Mom was doing. She was trying to get me access to the property where the other victims were being held. Derek's phone rang before he could respond to Mom's suggestion. As he answered, I could hear agitated French on the other end. Derek's face grew pale as he listened. "There's been some kind of emergency at the main property. I need to leave immediately." He looked between Mom and me uncertainly. "Corey, I'm afraid you'll need to come back another time." "What kind of emergency? Is everyone all right?" "Just a medical situation with one of our elderly guests. Nothing serious, but I need to be there." As Derek hurried us toward the door, Mom managed to whisper to me, "The device is safe. Whatever happens next, remember that I love you and I know you're fighting for me." Derek drove off rapidly, leaving me standing in the driveway with a mixture of hope and terror. Either our plan was working, or Derek had discovered the investigation and was moving to eliminate the evidence permanently. My phone buzzed with a text from Marie. "Audio signal active. We can hear everything. Derek is panicking and making mistakes. Stay close, but don't approach the property directly." Over the next hour, Marie relayed fragments of what the tracking device was picking up. Derek was arguing with Celeste about moving the packages, to a new location. There were references to cleaning up loose ends and eliminating problems before they escalate. Most chillingly, Derek was heard making arrangements for Mom's psychiatric evaluation to happen immediately rather than waiting until Monday. Dr. Dubois needs to sign the commitment papers today. We can't risk any more delays. But then Mom's voice came through clearly. I'm not going anywhere with Dr. Dubois or anyone else until I speak to the police about what's been happening here. Derek's response was sharp and threatening. Maman, you're confused again? Dr. Dubois is here to help you feel better. Mom's reply shocked everyone listening. I'm not confused, Derek. I've been recording our conversations for months, and I have proof of everything you've done to me and these other people. The police are already involved. There was a long silence, then Derek's voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Then we have a serious problem, don't we, Mama? The tracking device went silent. Marie's emergency response unit reached Derek's property within minutes of losing audio contact. They found 7 elderly people locked in a converted barn, including Mom, who was holding the digital recorder and refusing to let Derek take it away from her. Derek had been in the middle of destroying evidence when Mom finally revealed her months of secret documentation. Bank records were scattered around a burn barrel, and Derek was forcing people to sign papers they couldn't read. But Mom's recordings contained everything needed to prove systematic abuse and financial exploitation. The rescue itself was almost anticlimactic. Derek didn't resist arrest, probably calculating that cooperation would help his defense. Celeste tried to claim she was a victim too, just following Derek's instructions, but the recordings clearly captured her enthusiastic participation in the psychological torture. Dr. Dubois arrived at the property expecting to conduct a routine competency evaluation, and instead found himself witnessing the exposure of an elaborate fraud. His testimony about Derek's deceptions became crucial evidence for the prosecution. Over the following weeks, as French authorities unraveled Derek's operation, the full scope of his crimes became clear. He'd been running similar schemes in 3 different regions of France, targeting American retirees through carefully crafted online personas. The total financial theft exceeded $400,000, but the psychological damage was immeasurable. The other victims Derek had trapped were in various stages of learned helplessness. Some had been so thoroughly convinced of their own worthlessness that they initially defended Derek even after being rescued. It took weeks of counseling and support for most of them to begin reclaiming their sense of self-worth. Mom was different. Her strategic documentation and resistance had kept part of her spirit intact throughout the ordeal. But she still needed months of therapy to process the trauma of being systematically degraded by her own son. The legal proceedings took almost a year. Derek was eventually sentenced to 12 years in prison for human trafficking, elder abuse, financial fraud, and forgery. Celeste received 8 years for her role in the operation. Both were ordered to pay full restitution to their victims, though recovering the stolen money proved complicated due to hidden assets and international banking complexities. The most difficult part was learning about Derek's motivations. Through psychiatric evaluations and court testimony, a picture emerged of someone who had always resented Mom's attention toward me, who had felt overlooked and underappreciated throughout his childhood. Dad's death had given him an opportunity to finally control and punish Mom for what he perceived as lifelong favoritism. But knowing Derek's psychology didn't excuse what he'd done. It just explained how someone could systematically destroy the dignity of the person who raised them. Mom returned to Denver with me, but she wasn't interested in quietly retiring to recover from her trauma. Instead, she used her experience to help other families recognize warning signs of elder abuse. The support center she established became a model for protecting vulnerable seniors from family predators. 6 months after returning to America, Mom appeared on a national television program to tell her story. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of families reached out with similar experiences of relatives who had disappeared into caregiving situations abroad. Marie visited us in Denver the following Christmas. She'd been promoted to head France's new International Elder Protection Unit, inspired partly by Mom's case. Together, they were developing protocols to help families communicate across international boundaries when elderly abuse was suspected. The most surprising development was Derek himself. After 18 months in prison, he began writing letters acknowledging what he'd done and asking for forgiveness. Mom read every letter, but didn't respond for almost 2 years. When she finally wrote back, her message was simple: "I forgive you, because holding on to anger would give you power over me that I refuse to grant." But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean trusting. You destroyed something between us that can never be rebuilt. Derek's response revealed how thoroughly he'd misunderstood our family dynamics. "I always thought you loved Corey more than me. I wanted to prove I could take better care of you than he could." Mom's next letter ended their correspondence. "I didn't love Corey more. I loved you differently according to your different needs. You were strong and independent, so I respected your autonomy. Corey was sensitive and uncertain, so I offered more guidance. Love isn't a competition, Derek. It's a gift that grows when shared, not a resource that diminishes when divided." 3 years later, Mom's Support Center had helped reunite over 200 families and prevented countless cases of elder abuse through education and early intervention. She testified before Congress about the need for better international protections for American seniors living abroad. The most meaningful moment came when one of Derek's other victims, an elderly veteran named Frank, graduated from culinary school at age 78. Derek had convinced Frank that his war injuries made him useless and worthless. Mom helped Frank discover that his steady hands were perfect for pastry work, and he now operates a small bakery that employs other senior citizens looking for purpose and community. Standing in Frank's bakery on opening day, surrounded by people who had survived deliberate cruelty and chosen to rebuild their lives with dignity, I finally understood the lesson Mom had been teaching through her own example. Strength isn't about never being vulnerable. It's about refusing to let someone else's cruelty define your worth. Mom had endured months of systematic degradation, but she'd never internalized Derek's lies about her value as a human being. She documented the abuse while planning her resistance, maintaining faith that someone would eventually help her fight back. Family isn't automatically sacred just because people share blood. Real family means protecting each other's dignity, supporting each other's growth, and creating safe spaces where people can be authentically themselves. Derek had used family obligations as weapons to trap and control people. Mom used family love as a foundation for helping people rebuild their strength and independence. The hardest lesson was accepting that some people choose cruelty as a way to feel powerful, and no amount of love or forgiveness can change that choice. Derek hadn't become abusive because he lacked love. He'd become abusive because he preferred control to connection, dominance to empathy. But the most important lesson was hope. Every person Derek had broken was capable of healing. Every family he damaged could learn to trust again. Every dollar he'd stolen could be recovered through hard work and community support. Mom often says that Derek didn't make her stronger. He revealed strength she'd always possessed but had forgotten how to access. The woman who raised 2 sons while Dad worked double shifts had never disappeared. She'd just been buried under layers of manipulation and systematic degradation, designed to make her doubt her own perceptions. Now, when I watch Mom leading support groups or testifying at legal hearings, I see the person she was always meant to be. Not a victim who survived trauma, but a warrior who refused to surrender her essential humanity even when surrounded by people determined to convince her she was worthless. That's the gift she's given to everyone whose life she's touched since returning home. Not just the practical help of legal advocacy and emotional support, but the living example that no one can take away your dignity unless you give them permission. Derek took 3 years of Mom's life, thousands of dollars of her money, and months of her physical health. But he couldn't take her spirit, her intelligence, her capacity for love, or her determination to protect other people from experiencing what she'd endured. In the end, that's what victory looks like. Not revenge against the people who hurt you, but rebuilding a life so meaningful that their cruelty becomes just a chapter in a much larger story about resilience, community, and the power of refusing to give up on each other. Every day, I see Mom choosing hope over bitterness, action over despair, and love over fear. She's living proof that the worst thing that ever happened to you doesn't have to define what happens next. Have you ever had to fight for someone you love against people who claimed they were helping? The hardest battles aren't always against strangers. Sometimes they're against family members who use love as a weapon and obligation as a trap. If this story resonated with you, or if you've had similar experiences with elder abuse or family manipulation, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help another family recognize warning signs before it's too late. Please like this video. If Mom's courage inspired you, subscribe to hear more stories about people who refuse to give up when everything seemed hopeless. And share this with anyone who might need to know that fighting back is always possible, even when the system seems designed to protect the people who are hurting you. Thank you for listening to our story. I hope it reminds you that love isn't about control. It's about freedom, dignity, and the willingness to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. Keep believing in the power of families who truly protect each other, and never stop standing up for the people who can't stand up for themselves.